got some flavored creamers here too, if anyone wants any.
I got flavored creamers.
Yeah. It's just very hard. Like during the day, it's like every 10 minutes I'm kind of being back in.
I said, Louise, the sweetie girl. I said, Louise, the sweetie
Friday is officially upon us.
It is. This is Uneducated, and we are talking Jewish stuff today again, Jewish discussion. We have Marshal Olsen with us today. Marshal, it's good to have you here.
Thank you.
We also have Ralph from San Bernardino.
I have him muted. Okay, go. Hey, Ralph.
Good morning.
All right.
I was
Ralph,
supposed to warn him when we were getting ready, but...
yeah, Ralph is in the heart of fire country. Ralph, are any of those fires anywhere close to you? All that burning?
So thankfully this year, not really. Like we saw some smoke earlier this year, kind of covering the area. But last year it came within 2 miles of my house. The year before that was 6. So I don't think there's anything left to burn around me.
No, gotcha. Well, that's always good. All right. Well, today we're going to be talking about some really serious issues. We've come back. This is our episode 2 of this Jewish discussion. And just real quick, if you are online and listening to us from YouTube, make sure that you subscribe to our dedicated YouTube channel. We still don't have all of our regular Northeast subscribers over to our dedicated YouTube channel for Uneducated. So if you get a second, please do that. Make sure you subscribe to that channel so that we can switch over there and make sure that everybody gets the content. Also, click the bell. That way you can be notified of any kind of live videos or updated content that we put on there. And then if you're on Facebook and you're watching this on Facebook, make sure that you like and make sure that you share so we can get our content out. And so if you have comments, questions, thoughts today, make sure you get them in the comment section and we'll try to get back to you. Now, listen, sometimes those comments come in late. Sometimes we never see them for whatever reason. So we'll try to do our best to make sure that we get those comments looked at and answered. All right. So real quick, before we get started, we are sponsored by absolutely no one. However, there is a great coffee that Matt has introduced us to. And Matt, I don't know if, is that a close-up on that?
Hold on. I got to find that. And you're there. There
right.
you go. A little bit of Steel Cup.
This is Steel Cup Coffee Roasters, organic, certified organic, which means that there's only...
Which means that it's made out of organic material.
Right, which means that beans are naturally grown. They actually come from a tree or a plant.
They're
right?
not silicon beans.
Right. And it also means that only 50% of the pesticides that are normally used on regular coffee beans are used on these, correct?
I don't know. I
Something
don't know
like
what
that.
it really means. You're really hammering down a path I can't follow.
Yeah, but so what we're trying to say is this coffee tastes good, but we have no idea if it's good for you at all. It's barrel aged whiskey coffee, but it's non-alcoholic. So those of you that are not into alcohol, it's still a good drink.
But you want some round bourbon flavor?
Yeah.
You got it.
It's really good. That's what we're drinking today, just so you know. But nobody here is getting intoxicated at all. Nor are they even drinking alcohol at all. So
Well-
this is not the Joe Rogan show where we smoke pot and drink liquor the whole time during the show. Some people may have drank liquor and smoked pot before they came here, but that's not the case for us here.
No. All right, Ralph. We got Ralph's face up there, so Ralph can say hi.
All right, Ralph. Yeah,
Hello.
What did you say, San Bernardino this week?
I did.
Okay.
I think you used that one last week too.
No, last
I
week
think
was
that's where
Beaumont. Last week was Beaumont.
Beaumont.
Beaumont. Okay.
I got to start looking up other places in California. to say where you're
Truckee.
from.
Next week he'll be from Truckee.
Truckee.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So next week will be Truckee, and I'll try to get my geography and my
No, it's like he's a
cities
secret agent. It's really kind of cool, actually.
from different places.
Yeah, he's from undisclosed locations.
Yeah, which is really good. Ralph, technically though, being that you're not in wildfire territory right now, how is the weather out there? Because we always like to know how the weather is in San Bernardino.
So it is hot and dry.
Guess what?
So
Because of global warming, it's hot and dry here too.
No, it's humid.
oh really?
It's humid and rainy.
Yeah. Well, I'm just saying it is. It was hot yesterday. That's all I know.
So it's actually been cool for up until yesterday morning. It was like in the 60s, but then it ended yesterday at like 93. It's supposed to be like over high 90s today.
And
But I bet you guys still have grass there.
we do because we do have some rain. When I said it was dry, I just meant like usually where I spend most of my time, it's dry. So when it's hot, I feel like it's
Like in of doors.
yeah. When I'm indoors, it's
When
dry.
he's indoors, it's dry,
Mostly dry.
which really is a commentary that you are privileged.
Yeah, right. So my question is, in that cooler weather, do the fires tend to go down and start to go out since it's cooler, or do you actually need water to put those out?
You still need water or some kind of retardant to put out the fires, but when it's cooler, there's less new fires.
Gotcha. Yeah. All right. Well, enough about grass and fires. We're going to start talking about some other fires, and that's these kind of smoldering flames that come about when we start talking about Judaism and the Bible and
but
world
history.
History.
History. It's in the eye of the winner. Mm-hmm. Yeah, the winner holds the history,
Right.
as it were.
Yeah, and so today we're in a culture where we're canceling a lot of history. It's really hard to find good historical accounts unless you have some hardbacks, because if you go online, you don't know how that stuff has been changed. And so that's kind of one of the arguments, would you not say, gentlemen, that people say surrounding the Bible and other texts is that, oh, over the years it's been changed, and how are you supposed to know what's true and all those kind of things. And so today we're going to try to get to the bottom of some of this stuff. And I think we're going to go back to where we left off last week, and we'll just jump right in to the whole Eisenhower stuff. We kind of left off with, Marshall, you were going to go back and try to get us maybe some websites and some information on these Eisenhower death camps that you were talking about. And
Yes.
then Matt and I were talking a little bit this morning, too. We would like to kind of press in and just see where the motive of all this is, because, we'll just turn it over to you, let you start throwing some information out. We'll look some stuff up, and then we'll see what we got out of that.
Okay.
All right.
Excellent. Eisenhower was a 4-star general
Okay.
during World War II. Well, it's kind of ironic. Here, real quick. This is kind of funny.
Here, you got to do me a favor and pull that microphone in.
All right. In 1941, Eisenhower was a lieutenant colonel that had never seen a day of battle in his life.
Okay.
By 1943, he was a 4-star general and Supreme Commander of the Allied Forces in Western Europe.
Okay.
Just a little tidbit there.
And this is for the United. He's in Western Europe, but this is in U.S. military.
Yes, U.S. military.
Okay.
This is like because by this time they were 43 and 44 was the build up to the invasion of Normandy Beach
Okay.
on D-Day, like June 6th.
Yep.
Here's another little funny tidbit. He had no academic background, but yet after he was done in the forces, when he came back to Washington, he was made president of Columbia University in 1948,
Okay. All right.
which I just thought that was
Yeah.
just
Well,
one of those little like tidbits of historical information,
Mm-hmm.
you know?
That's kind of like honorary doctorate type stuff,
Yeah.
Yeah.
right? People don't really do anything to earn anything. They just because of their presence or something they get.
Yeah,
guess-
exactly.
okay.
There was, yeah. Okay, so the death camps themselves. So there was, what had happened is after the war, you had POW camps, prisoner of war camps.
Yep. And let's just get basic. That World War.
World War II.
Okay.
After World War II, German forces were stopped. They were turning themselves in, surrendering, because they thought they would get fair treatment from Allied forces. And actually, when George Patton, when he would capture people at like towards the end of the war, at the end he would just kind of like kind of let them go. Obviously disarm them and, just kind of kick them in the butt and send them off, hopefully they find their way home or whatever,
Right. Right.
But after 1945, in spring of 1945, I'll get the actual locations next time too. There's definitely some more, there's all kinds of stuff on this. But, they had prisoner of war, their people are marked prisoner of war if they're caught and captured by the enemy. These people were not labeled prisoner of war. They were labeled DEFs, which is disarmed enemy forces.
Okay.
So therefore, they weren't entitled food or water or any type of special privilege under the Geneva Convention that normal prisoners of war get.
Okay.
This is in a book.
So when did these exist?
And
They were after after World War II?
Yeah, 1945, 1946.
Was this the Japanese internment camps that we had? Did we turn these into this?
No, these were camps in Europe that we set up over
Okay.
there.
All right.
Actually, Matt, if you want to go to Wikipedia, has it right on Wikipedia. Disarmed enemy forces, DEFs, less commonly surrendered enemy forces. It says here was a U.S. designation for soldiers who surrendered to an adversary after hostilities ended, and for those POWs who had already surrendered and were held in camps in occupied German territory at the time.
Yeah, I mean, most likely because since the 80s, there was a journalist in Canada that wrote a book called Other Losses. And this book called Other Losses described this whole, how all this, transcribed throughout the course of right after the war. Mm-hmm. And he did a bunch of research into it. And a lot of the information comes from this guy. Well, as far as like he's responsible for the one getting it out there. Then there was two generals. I'll make sure I have their names next time. But there was two generals that in the 50s they put out papers, but the papers were suppressed describing this, and that came out through this Canadian journalist.
Okay.
Now, and here's another little tidbit of just for instance, I alluded to it to you, Brian, before we started, but I remember I was young, but remember the media telling us all about the yellow cake uranium in Iraq and why we had to go into Iraq,
Right.
And justify killing millions of Iraqis. And,
Right.
when after the war, when Madame Albright was asked if, starving millions of Iraqis' children was worth it, she's like, of course it was. It
Yeah.
was worth it,
Right. Okay, so when we look back at that, so yeah, if you go to Wikipedia too, it says controversies in '89, other losses. James, how do you say his name? Baquet.
I'm not even.
But anyway, he claimed that the Allied Supreme Commander Dwight Eisenhower deliberately caused the death of 790,000 German captives in internment camps through disease, starvation, and cold from 1944 to 1949. Let's see. So yeah, Niall Ferguson wrote that Bach's calculations grossly exaggerated both the number of Germans and Americans captured and their mortality. However, Ambrose conceded that we as Americans can't duck the fact that terrible things happened, and they happened at the end of the war, that we fought for decency and freedom, and they're not excusable. So even though he said they were grossly exaggerated, he said these atrocities did happen. So I know people personally who think that George W. Bush was justified at going into Iraq and doing all those things because, protecting American people and all that stuff. It was okay to do what we did, whether it's killing innocent people, whatever happened over there. Mm-hmm. And whether we made up that stuff in order for us to go over there, whether certain things are being made up now to go into Afghanistan and figure out how to retaliate, all that, we know that politics and governments are being led by these demonic realms and forces, and they're always doing these kind of things. So my question is this. If we can admit and even say, okay, some numbers might be exaggerated about Dwight Eisenhower's death camps and about what happened in Iraq, then we have to at least be able to go back and look at the history and go, okay, maybe some numbers are exaggerated. Maybe it wasn't 6 million Jews, but it appears that the evidence shows that the Holocaust did happen. These places were being used to kill Jews and other groups of people, because it wasn't just Jews that were killed. Yep. There were a lot of people that were killed during that time. We could at least admit that those atrocities happened. We weren't there to be able to count all the bodies.
We don't know all the numbers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And another thing too, that a lot of typhus took the lives of many people in Germany at that time. Mm-hmm. And when you look up,
is typhus a bacterial?
Yeah, it's like a parasite.
It's spread
like
through It's spread through blankets.
Oh, that's what Washington used with the. Is that true? No, but he spread. What did he spread? Measles?
No, yeah, smallpox.
Smallpox
with the blankets.
Yeah, I mean, we all have this perception of of put into us of what Germany was, and how how like it's like a horror movie. You know what I mean? And because that's our only perception of it is Hollywood movies.
Okay, so let's to try and go somewhere. If you were gonna paint an alternative view of Germany that we should have, what would it be?
Could it be so far-fetched as to think that the Germans, as a people, not the leadership, not the government, but as a people, the Germans were very Christian?
No, of course they were.
Yes.
They were very Catholic.
So, and then
Christians do a lot of bad things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, Christians do dumb things all the time.
So Germany's not just Catholic.
No, it's where Martin Luther came from. I mean, come on.
Well,
Yeah.
no, it depends on what region of Germany you're at. So, like Bavaria and down southern, like closer to Austria,
Yeah.
that's a very Catholic region, and most of the rest of Germany is very Lutheran.
Okay.
Not that there's much difference, in my opinion, but
yeah, and I mean, the whole World War II, essentially, when you look at what it was it's nationalism, which the people of Germany, it was a nationalist movement. The government labeled it nationalist socialism, because what the government did was they basically bought everything up and put everyone back to work by issuing their own currency, but they didn't have a silver or gold backed currency. What they did was they actually backed their currency with production and labor. So therefore no one could come in and devalue it. Like, that was one of the major complaints of Germany at the time, is through the Weimar Republic, how their money had been driven through hyperinflation. Like, there's pictures of children in from the Weimar Republic after World War One, pushing wheelbarrows of money around. You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
stuffing it in walls. And that's what and that's what was done to the German people after World War One. Was they were driven into destitution, and then so there's. You guys asked me too.
But this is a Europe problem, right?
Big time.
Yeah, I mean Europe has gone back and forth on itself. And the founding fathers were like, "Hey, stop getting messed up in that stuff. Like, let it go.
Totally agree.
Let them go do their thing."
But why it's important to know what happened to Europe back then is because it's happening to us today, and history is repeating itself.
No, and history repeats itself because we're all sinning, stupid human beings.
Well, plus, it's easy to run the same game on people over and over again if you never teach them the game.
Yeah, but at this point, it's so obvious the powers of observation. If you, I think what is annoying about the Germans of World War II was that they may very well have been Christian, and I think a lot of them were decent people. I mean, I don't think they were all tiny Hitlers running around by any means. But what they didn't do was go, "Hey, we're human beings. Let's stand up for other human beings, because this certainly can't be right either." And we're doing the same thing in this country now, and the same thing happened in Venezuela 10 years ago, and so on and so on. And it's why I think whatever we have coming to this country, we're going to lay down too. We have all these guns, and I know the world's all afraid of us and whatever. We're just going to lay down.
I mean, yeah, I'm pretty sure it's going to play out exactly like the Bible says it's going to. You know what I mean? As far as like the book of Revelation / Apocalypse, however you want to,
Yeah.
whatever you're reading from. But yeah, I mean, another thing too. I mean, here's a little funny tidbit I found through looking up all this stuff. Did you know that we've already had a black president before Obama? Because Dwight Eisenhower's mother was black.
Sweet.
Nice.
Her name was Ida Stover Eisenhower.
I love the name Ida.
And it doesn't matter to me personally if she's black or green or it doesn't matter. That doesn't matter. What matters is why the deception, why lie to us.
Well, because when Eisenhower would have been president, we were still allowed to not like blacks.
Well, yeah, I mean, think about it. Like, you have his father was Jewish too, so you have a Jewish, half Jewish, half black man leading American
Sammy
Germans.
Davis.
Leading
Sammy Davis.
Yeah,
Jr.
exactly. Leading up, basically.
Ralph, is none of this funny? You're not even cracking a smile.
I can't hear him at all. I only hear you two. So I don't know what's being said.
I think I'm close enough.
Like, shouldn't this go back? Like, shouldn't he hear our board feed?
Yeah, if we can hear him, he should be able to hear. If he can hear us and we can hear ourselves.
Ralph, we're starting to think that you're making up this whole technical difficulty.
Yeah, you just don't want to answer.
You just don't want to be on the show. No, I can't believe you're going through my phone speaker. That means you're going through my phone speaker, and I don't know how you're going to hear him. I thought that you were getting the feed from our board back to the phone.
I can hear him good.
Move the phone closer to him. I'll be able to hear him.
I can hear him good through my mic.
Yeah, no, because the
to the
phone is
headset.
plugged into the board. It's not going the other way. So you're gonna have to project like you're on WKRP in Cincinnati.
All right. I should move the mic away from me a little bit then, if I have to talk louder.
Yeah,
All right.
that's fine.
There we go. Okay.
There we go. Okay, I'm just going to repeat everything he says, Ralph.
Okay.
All right, I'm going to laugh right now. Ha 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 ha. Okay, he's laughing right now.
All right.
All right, let's get on with this.
You've hardly heard anything that we got going
Okay.
on.
Correct.
Okay, so catch you up real quick. Eisenhower had death camps in Germany, 44 to 49, and we were talking about we were asking the point, and it's important to you that people will know that Germans weren't all monsters.
Yeah, I mean, not to mention the German people were the only country, the only force, and not to mention Germany had 26 allied nations allied with them. Like, there was books written by Veronica Clark. You could type in like black Nazis, and do a search on black Nazis and find Africa was aligned with Germany. You know, there's black dudes on the internet wearing the, you know, brown shirt Nazi garb. You know, so like the whole like this perception of they're like the hardcore white supremacists that hated all the other races. They're the master race, and everyone was beneath them. No, that's not the case at all. I mean, really, there's another race on the planet that feels that way and thinks like that and thinks how they're the, you know, well, they word it a little different. They say they're God's chosen people, but they're the humans. And the rest of everyone else is like, you know, the cattle goyim, I guess you could call it, or whatever.
Okay, so let me jump in then, because as we walk down this road, this is part of the human dilemma or the human problem. That is that if we are frustrated because there is an elite group of people that are claiming that we are less than human, or certain people are less than human, then for us to turn around and say those people are less than human, I don't know that's not, number one, it's not going to help the problem, and number two, it's not going to be biblically accurate.
Well, no, not at all. And I am not saying they are less than human.
All right.
I'm just saying, like, those are the, you know, we have this through the way we're brought up and education and entertainment. The point I was trying to make is we have a perception of what the Germans were. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And then we also have another perception of what other groups of people are. Mm-hmm. And here to find out, it's like, wow, those groups of people wasn't what I thought they were to be, because I was misled by false information. You know what I mean?
Okay, so part of your struggle then is that the idea is that protect Jewish people, no more anti-Semitism. But today you feel like there's this really push for anyone that is German or anyone that has a certain ideological background that is not for the Jewish people is then deemed evil or Nazi or horrible
exactly.
people.
Like, for instance, when they had there was, I think, the boycott sanctions, and I forget the acronym they used, but there was a movement like 5 or 6 years ago, and it was taken off pretty good, to basically boycott Israel goods and products for their treatment of the Palestinian people.
Okay.
BDF, I think it was called.
Okay.
BDF sanctions. And there's actual laws that were put in place and throughout the United States by different states, and also like different policy written on universities, to where people weren't allowed to talk about the BDS anymore, under risk of like losing their tuition, or even if they're a professor, losing their job. Like, if you're a professor in Florida and like are pro BDS, the boycott sanctions movement, you could lose your job in Florida. You know, so we have that's why I mean they're bringing upon the laws. These, you know, I mean, like, for instance, in Germany, if you question the Holocaust, you know, the numbers of the Holocaust, they just threw like an 88-year-old woman in prison not too long ago over this stuff, you know.
Okay.
And she was there, you know, she was alive to see it.
Yeah, but this is their problem.
I agree.
This is not my problem.
But their problem, what they've dealt with, is coming here.
Yeah, but listen, you know where Vlad the Impaler came from, right?
Europe.
Germany.
Yeah.
The Germans really have done some pretty despicable things too. Like
a German by the name of Vlad the Impaler.
Yeah, but there was a whole movement. I mean, again, who's in charge of the Europe? Like, if we want to go down conspiracy, and I'm just playing devil's advocate here.
Yeah.
Not really. I'm like, they're all devils. All right. Who's running the European Union? Why did Britain want out? Because the European Union is really run by Germany. Merkel was in charge of the whole thing.
Well, they're communists, though, too. It's communism. I mean, Merkel, yeah, she's German, but I'm pretty sure she doesn't have Germanic blood in her veins. You know what I mean? Like, there's a lot of imposters out there that say they're Germans and do evil things to make the German people look bad.
And so, what are we trying to figure out? What are we sorting through here? Because as far as I can tell, it's, we're shoving from the same pile of turd. And it doesn't matter to me. I mean, we can talk about it and how it affects policy and so on and so on. But
well, I would just, last week You want?
I know. I wanted proof. I understand absolutely, and so Eisenhower may or may not. This is the hard thing I have. I can't prove any of it. I'm listening to what you say and what you found, and then I am listening to where I am at, starting to become in life, is wondering who in the world was telling me anything of the truth, or sort like the Magna Carta happened. Was that good or bad?
I mean, well, Magna Carta is good but I mean, Magna Carta has nothing to do with us either, because that's a European thing.
Of course. This is why I'm asking. I'm calling into
But
question.
see, we're descendants of these Germanic people. Our people came from Europe. So see how the Magna Carta.
But you don't think I have American Indian in me somewhere.
The Magna Carta does affect us because we adopted that European, you know what I mean, and and took it, and basically that's where the Bill of Rights, basically comes from. I mean, I'm not pro Constitution at all, like either at this point anymore. I mean, the Constitution is pretty much that's the government. That's what the government rules were supposed to be. This is what the government is allowed to do.
Yeah.
Then because it's a contract. It's a contract between the people and the government.
Sure.
And they've breached that contract, so it's null and void at this point.
I agree completely.
Okay.
But it's but the thing of it is, I still think historically, if individuals would self-govern and understand that they have a responsibility to the God that made them, we could still use the Bill of Rights. Like, the Bill of Rights only works with people who want to self-govern and want to understand that there's an order and a created universe.
Yeah, exactly. And that's how Americans used to be.
For the most part, yeah.
Almost 100 years ago.
Right.
But then they dissolved, through different acts, of policy, basically. It's all corporate policy at this point. But, and then they subvert your nation. They subvert your culture.
Yeah, so it's not a hard push. It's not going to be a hard sell that there are bad actors in Washington that are subverting and supplanting the independence of this country, because since its inception, it's been hated.
Yes.
Right? So it's not going to be a hard sell to me that we are being run by a bunch of zombies.
Yeah, or butchers.
Yeah, no, listen, I'm on board.
Okay, well then let's run down the road then to descent. Because if we take this all the way back to the beginning of time when God created, and we walk through that, I think part of our struggle here is trying to define the good guys and the bad guys.
Yes.
I think people have always tried to do that.
The wheat and the tares.
Yes, the wheat and the tares, right. And so Jesus talked about it. So let's kind of go down that road a little bit. Ralph, do you have anything to add to what we've said so far? And then I'd like to go down this road of where we descended from and how that goes, and how do we actually delineate between good people and bad people, and is there even a marker for that, and how we work through that? But do you have anything to say, Ralph, before we head that way?
So I will say I'm going to do a quick synopsis of everything from the last 2 weeks. So I am German as well. I'm actually very, very proud of my German heritage.
Oh.
My mom always used to say that we're more German than the Germans because, like, both lines of our family are German, every branch, where a lot of the ones in Germany have been intermingled with other parts of Europeans. So, like, I was brought up in a lot of German traditions. I can agree with and appreciate a lot of the things you're saying. I lived in Germany for a couple years, and, like, one of the things that really bothered me was that to this day, they're still being punished for World War II. Like, they make every kid go to a concentration camp, even though they're generations away from what actually happened there. That's part of their, like, requirement to graduate high school. They're forced to take at least 2 years of English. Not that that's a bad thing, but it's something that we imposed as, like, when we had power over the German nation, that they still do, right? Mm-hmm. That's my issue with it. I think that
Ralph, can I just throw in here? I don't know if the number I think I just heard recently. So far, Germany has paid $90 billion in retributions over the whole thing. Does that sound about right?
I actually don't know. I do know it's a lot, but I don't keep track with like the actual number money, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then like, I'm definitely not an anti-Semite, so I have to say that because of what he was saying earlier. But if you question the 6.6 million Jews that were killed, you're automatically deemed like an anti-Semite or a Nazi. But there was actually a Jewish mathematician who said that that number was physically and literally like impossible to do that or to kill that many people with the means that they had. So like even some of the Jewish people question that, but that doesn't negate the fact that there was a Holocaust and that like a lot of people died that shouldn't have. You know what I mean? So I'm not trying to minimize it at all. I'm just saying Germany's been overpunished for this, in my opinion. We as the superpowers in the world, like Britain, France, the United States, we set up World War II to happen based on what we did to the German people of the Treaty of Versailles after World War One. Now, that being all said, those are the things that I agree with you about. What I don't agree is the perspective on Jews. I don't think that they, like when we were talking last week about them coming from like different lines, they're not the real Jews anymore. Now we're the real Jews, the Germanic people. I don't agree with that. And like, I think that one of the problems with America today, and maybe Christianity as a whole, is that we are often not theologically sound. So like what we do is we read the Bible with a preconceived notion of what we want it to say, and then we pull out things that support our thoughts on that viewpoint, right? So a perfect case in point of that is, you know, slavery in the South. The Bible talks a lot about slavery. It talks in the Old Testament mostly about slavery, right? And what defines like being a proper slave and being a proper master. And I honestly, to this day, think that if you followed biblical slavery, it would be okay, because you have like a debt and you go to a master and you say, hey, I can't pay this debt. Can I do 7 years of service to pay my debt? And the guy says, yeah, right. Then if he takes care of you, you can choose to be a slave forever. So like, I think that's okay, rather than being in debt your whole life and like being a slave to the lender, right? Whether you're physically a slave or not. But to go and take an entire people group from another country that don't owe you anything, and you just take them over and you say it's for God because you want to teach them Christianity, you bring them back, and then as pastors and people in the church and slave owners, they all believed that what they were doing was okay, and they used the Old Testament scriptures to support it, but they picked and choose. Their theology wasn't strong. So you have to have a strong biblical theology in order to come up with sound doctrine. So you can't take one or two things. You have to read things in wholes. You have to read like the whole book of Genesis or the whole Old Testament or the whole Bible together and cross-reference everything and find the universal truth. Because if you look at the story of Jews specifically, just that, right? Across the Bible, they're God's chosen people. He loves them. Like, he gives everything to the Jew first and then to the Gentile. And like to try to twist that, I don't see it being biblical theology.
I think
your guys' thoughts?
Yeah, I think those are really good points, and I think we'll just throw it back over because I heard some breath come out. So Marshall's going to jump in here, and then I want us to run back. So Marshall, you want to respond to that real quick?
Yeah, just real quick. I think a lot of times the word Jew and Israelite gets misplaced, or one person, like someone will take it and be like, yeah, Jewish and Israelite mean the same thing, you know, and they don't. Yeah, I agree. I don't want, you know, what I'm saying to be misconstrued. Like, I don't think like all of a sudden we're the new Jews. It's just that we've always been the Israelites. They've always been the Jews, right? But the word Jew comes from, well, the word was no J, so it was a Ute. They were called Utes. And it's because, you know, you have this migration from Edom into Judea, you know, and then, so you have the Judites, and then you have these Jews. that, basically, so it was like a slang term given to these people that migrated into the lands of Judea. So I don't, it's the tribes, because actually there's 13 tribes, because Judah got two portions, right? So like, wouldn't it be, you have the 12 brothers,
Yep.
but Judah itself, because it was like the king class, the king line, the line of where the kings came from, and his two sons got a proportion of that inheritance. So there was 13 tribes total, right?
Well, you have two half tribes.
Yeah.
So you still have 12, but you have the two half tribes. So it still makes 12.
Okay. So yeah, but the half
They
tribes.
call them half tribes.
Oh, half tribes. Okay, gotcha.
Yeah. So Manasseh and Ephraim were half tribes.
Okay.
They were Joseph's two sons to his wife, and so go ahead.
Yeah, and then what I'm getting at is, see, and those tribes, that's where our people, the Germanic, the Scottish, Celtic, the Anglo-Saxon, if you will, you know what I mean? That's who we descend from, our progeny, and for instance, Jewish people. Okay, did you know that like white-skinned Jews, they're Ashkenazi Jews, right? That's their technical term, as Ashkenazi Jews. Ironically, Nazi is the last four letters of Ashkenazi, which I find ironic. Seeing as how that the Germans never even called themselves Nazis. The word Nazi was invented by someone in the press, you know what I mean, as a slang term, because it sounded like Stasi, and also, Matt, last week when you were talking too, how like always wonder why how America and Germany were so buddy right up until the war,
Right?
Well, it's because we had a consensus mutual hatred for communism.
Okay.
You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
there was a big communist movement ever since 1917. That started off in Russia. And then when the Germans marched and the Germans led the offensive into Russia, on their pendants, they had right on their belt buckle, it said "Gott mit uns," which means God with us. So I just don't see the Germans as these like satanically possessed evil people that the world sees them as, and then it's like, man, who's telling me that these people are as evil as they are? And then I look at like, the Hollywood producers and the directors and then all this stuff that comes out with Epstein Island,
Right.
And the whole thing. Epstein Island it's a Mossad front for Israel to entrap our politicians, right. And then you wonder why Israel gets $38 billion a year from taxpayer dollars.
Right, and here's the thing. I think that as a discussion point, what we're heading down and what we want to talk about more is that I don't think it's productive then, and it's definitely a trap and a deception then, to try and prove that, say, German people or a certain people group are not these horrible people necessarily, but then to turn around and try to say that these are the horrible people in a way to do that. And I don't think it's biblically accurate, number one, but I don't think it's productive, because when you go back to the scriptures, you see that none of us are good. No, not one. Paul says, he's quoting Psalms. And so the idea is that everyone has, because of sin, everyone has a potential. All three of us guys in this room and the guy in San Bernardino, California right now, we all have this potential to do exactly what these people were talking about.
When I see Jeffrey Epstein, I don't go, oh, like the rest of the Jews, he wants to abuse children. No, I go, hey, that's a filthy animal by himself.
I agree, but I did the legwork and to see who's connected to this guy.
Yeah.
And really, Jeffrey Epstein is a front man.
He is. He's a scapegoat.
He was worth nothing. The bulk of his wealth was gifted to him by a guy named Les Wexner that lives right here in New Albany, Ohio.
Let's go visit him.
86th richest man in the country. He's a head of something called the World Jewish Council, where 12 members sit, and they think they run the world. He would own the biggest yacht up until like the mid 90s or something when he sold it. Okay. But regardless, he where his claim to fame was is his father owned the department store, the limited brand department store that then Les turned into the basically Abercrombie and Fitch, Victoria's Secret, all that
I
stuff.
love those places.
And mind you, the average age for Victoria's Secret to go get models, for their underwear catalogs is 12 years old. So these are the people that are running the banks, the entertainment system. Pretty much, I mean, they're running the world. Like that's why, I see what you're saying, Brian. Where you're like, well, I agree, we're all inherently evil. But if we all knew the truth, if we all knew the facts of of all this stuff, people would have a better way of gauging, when you see all this evil stuff happening, and it's just like, I don't want these people to all be Jewish, right?
Right.
But it keeps coming up.
Okay, so listen then.
Well, Hillary Clinton's pretty terrible. Is she a Jew?
Well, no, but
think so.
got money from, and another thing too is Ghislaine Maxwell is photographed in Chelsea's wedding, and Chelsea had to marry, Chelsea's married to one of these Chabad Lubavitch,
Right.
Practitioners.
And Bill was on the Epstein Island jet manifest 27 times, I believe. That was the
so
number,
he's got an intimate relationship with Epstein.
Yeah, so
Or,
Bill
or
has
he
some
really
close
likes
time.
that airplane.
Yeah, and possibly Tom Hanks as well, but he's in Australia now, right?
I mean, then that's what I mean. You see all these people in the books, the Prince Andrew, and they're all these real leaders, and they're all engaged in the most diabolical,
But why? I mean, the Bible
exploitation of
tells us this is going to happen.
Right,
Yeah.
and so that's where
Because they're in love with this world,
Yeah.
and they want to be the god of this world.
and not just these people we call Jews today or whatever. It's all people. So let's run down this, whether it's just this episode or if we take a couple more episodes and talk about this. I'd really like to get out because I think what Ralph said is totally on the money.
Yeah.
And that is this. If we are going to begin to expose, which you've talked about, which I think we should, as Christians, we should be exposing evil. We should bring things that are done in the dark, they need to be brought into the light, and they need to be exposed. I agree 100%. I agree that whoever that is, whether it's Jew, Gentile, person in Hollywood, or an Amish guy up the street, it all needs to be dealt with, and justice needs to be served, and we should be about the justice of serving people and those kind of things. I agree 100%. But as we do that, I think we need to get back to really good, sound doctrine and theology. And that has to be run by sometimes saying, well, I don't know for sure, but I need to think about that. But as we do that theology, I think it's really important that as we speak, we do not classify, even if it's 60% of a group of people that are doing bad things. I think it's really important that we don't classify the entire group as these horrible people.
Yeah.
Because what happens is what we're seeing right now with all these race wars, and that's exactly what
It's actually the exact wrong time to take that approach.
well, it would be there's never a good time, but it's definitely
this
wrong
is the
time.
exact.
Well, I never tried. It's not all. I'm not saying all Jews. I'm just saying that that guy that did that, he was Jewish, and this guy that did that, he was Jewish. I'm just pointing out the fact that I mean, if when I find the ones that aren't Jewish, I'll make sure I point that out.
But let me ask the question: do most people? Well, I shouldn't say that because maybe some people do. But like when I think about Adolf Hitler, I just go Adolf Hitler. I don't even think German.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah, I'm not thinking about the nationality. I mean,
I'm thinking the dude had to be somewhere really messed in the head to be able to do what he did and think that somehow he was serving God. And the scriptures tell us that one day there's going to be people that are going to come to kill us, Christians, and they're going to think that what they're doing is actually of God.
Oh yeah.
And so there's text in there that tells us that. So I think if we get back and we start tracing this back scripturally, I think we're going to find out that we're all going to learn some really great things about not only ethnicities and races, but we're going to learn something about this sin nature that rests in all of us. And I don't know if you guys have time, but obviously you're here today, so we'll do it a little bit. But if we want, we could spend a few weeks on this. But I think we'd have a good time doing this, just walking through the scriptures, because I think theology-wise, we gotta get back to sound theology, what Ralph said. So let me just start here then. A lot of people have problems with African Americans or black people. And when I say a lot of people, I'm saying people that, for whatever reason, because of the color of their skin or how they are depicted in movies or in certain towns that they live in, people have these mindsets about, so for instance, we'll just go off the whole African American or black people thing. We'll just say people have a mindset about people that live in, say, for instance, certain areas. So some people that live in Newberry are thought a lot differently in this area than people that live, say, in Chardon. Okay?
The Kiwanis Lake people.
The Kiwanis Lake people, you're exactly right. Some people think differently about people that live in Mespo as opposed to people that live in Solon. So we just understand that.
Homeschoolers.
And I would like to go back to what Thomas Sowell wrote. And Thomas Sowell is a black gentleman that works for, I'm trying to think
The
now.
Universal Circus.
Well,
Here,
I
let me
think
help you
it's,
out.
I don't know if it's Yale or Harvard, but it's a think tank through one of those big universities. Anyway, long story short, I think he's law professor, those kind of things. But he writes and says that racism was never a skin issue. It was always a power and money issue. It was a political issue. And so if we go back to that and we go back to the early races of people, let's just start depicting that. So if you go all the way back to the Bible, you had Adam and Eve, and we'll start here. And Ralph, you're a literalist, so we're going to start here with Adam and Eve, and we're going to talk about whether or not this young man by the name of Cain was an actual seed or was the offspring of Satan or this creature in the Garden of Eden having sex with Eve, and they created this son, Cain. Let's look and see if we can find theological accuracy on whether or not that's true, because I'm pretty sure, if I remember right, Marshall, you said you have read things and you've seen things that can have kind of allowed you to go down this road that says, yeah, I think Cain is the offspring of Satan and Eve having sex.
Yes.
Okay, so go
Yes.
ahead. Okay, so Ralph, let's start there. Any thoughts on that? Let's just start throwing some ideas out.
So I will say Cain is the offspring of the serpent, but not in a literal sense. I don't think the serpent had sex with. It never says it in the Bible that it's literal. Why are you shaking your head?
Well, how can you say
how
can you say he's the offspring of the serpent? I don't even understand that.
So
Offspring.
No, I get what he's trying to say.
Go ahead. Well, explain it, please.
Okay, so metaphorically, like the theme of Genesis, the beginning of Genesis.
Brian,
just keep your mouth closed.
before you get saved, you are technically offspring of the serpent.
No,
You are under the sphere of sin.
you might be under the
You
sphere
are
of
a
sin, but
sinner.
offspring has a totally different definition than I am under sin.
Ralph,
Go ahead.
Ralph, I get where you were trying to go there, but I think that you may not be on the side of right on this one. Go ahead. But anyway, go ahead.
I will share something with you later. But anyway, like in our little group, right?
Why do we gotta do
anyway,
it later?
I say we do it right now.
Let's just bust it out.
No, it's something for you to read. That's why.
Oh, all
I
right.
don't want to just sit here and read like chapters of a book.
Okay. All right. Let's go.
All right. So,
We've opened up a whole new can of stuff.
Hey, it's coming.
Okay.
no, when you read Genesis, it talks about enmity between her seed and the serpent, right?
Yes.
So it's just talking about Jesus, right?
Yeah.
And what?
I just saying two. I was just confirming what you're saying.
Two
Yes.
seeds.
Two
Yeah.
seeds.
Two seeds.
Two seeds. His seed
Yeah.
and her seed.
Right. So who is his seed? It's sin into the world. It is a metaphor. It's not literal. But Cain was the first example.
He can see you.
I really hate you, Brian.
Well, for all I'm saying, Ralph, is for a literalist, you're really getting metaphorical.
Yeah, you've really blown your literalism.
Well, so I'm still literal with the Bible. The Bible says things literally, right? But it also has theology, which you have to read into.
Okay.
It doesn't say. So anyway, it's not blowing my literalist stuff. Anyway,
I love you,
let me
Ralph.
just
I'm
finish,
just
let me
playing.
finish my point without some shaking heads, just for a second.
Okay, I'll stay.
So someone tie it down. So the seed of the serpent is sin in the human race. It is the continuation of we're all born into sin, and Cain was born into sin, which caused him to not give his offerings to God in faith, which is why they were rejected by God. It's also what caused him to murder Abel, right? So sin entered the world and grew and expounded, and God said, all right, I need a new start with Noah. So with Noah, he cleansed the earth. He started off with just Noah and his family, and hoped the issue would still be resolved, right? Because he got rid of all the evil people in the world. But as they started to settle down again, Noah got drunk, and Ham disgraced Noah. Right? That's why he became separated from the group. So the story of the seed of Satan, or the seed of the serpent, is still there. Sin is still in the world, and it wasn't resolved by the flood, and it needs something bigger. So, like, it's not. I do not believe that the serpent literally had sex with Eve and created a separate line. But what I do believe is that through the serpent and Eve being the first human to disobey God, sin entered the world, and it's been a continuation since in every generation.
Okay.
All right, go ahead and shake your head, Brian. I'm done.
No,
Is
I'm
this
done.
why we can still beat our wives on the courthouse steps in South Carolina on Sundays with a rod no bigger than our thumbs?
I don't know the correlation.
Well, it's a law.
That's a big rod.
My big thing is like, how do I differentiate? How do I know when to take the Bible literally and when to take it metaphorically?
All right, let's talk about that. So let's go back. Even if we're going back to the fact that God said part of the curse would be that he would put hostility or enmity between the serpent's seed and the woman's seed. Obviously, those are two different seeds. She has a seed, he has a seed. It's not his seed in her, it's her seed. So her seed is the seed that came through Adam and Eve and Cain. So I think we have to be careful to say that sin entered or sin was became a really big problem with Cain, because if you remember, they also, after they raised the little Cain, they had Abel. So that's a joke.
That's good. No, that's
so they had Abel. So to say that Abel was somehow sinless or perfect would be a wrong theology, because even though he brought a good sacrifice, still does not make him sinless or without the need of a savior. We just don't hear of any problems. He probably made Cain really ticked off half the time because he probably was always picking on him and stuff. Who knows? Anyway, long story short, I think trying to say that Cain is yes, what he did was a manifestation of sin, but that sin came into the world, we're told in Genesis, back when Eve and Adam ate the fruit. That's when sin entered the world. So to take Cain and say he is the seed of the serpent, he is the seed of sin, that's where it all began, I don't know that that's good theology. Yes or no?
That's not exactly what I'm trying to say. So yes, obviously, Adam and Eve sinned, and I never once said that Abel was perfect. So Paul says that Cain's offerings were due to a lack of faith, where Abel had faith, right?
Right.
So I'm saying that Abel had faith. I'm not saying he was perfect.
Okay, but isn't even that
well, so you're saying like when Cain killed Abel, that was the next manifestation of sin?
No. So what I'm saying is, like,
I don't think so.
When Adam and Eve first took, that's when sin entered the world, right?
And then it was
Cain
just
is
here.
Huh?
And then it's just here. From then on, it's just here. Like
Yes.
Adam and Eve are in the garden, and Eve's like, Adam, how come you never fix this thing? And then
like, "You
she's
don't give
like,
me any."
she repeats it. Adam, why didn't you? You're not even listening to me. And he goes, oh yeah, no, I couldn't hear you. Even though he clearly heard her, he just lied.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, like that happened.
Yeah, right.
All right.
Right.
So like,
So
it was just sin was just happening.
Yeah.
Had to be.
So I'm not saying that sin stopped happening in between that time and Cain. What I'm saying is he was the first offspring that sin, like, we're all born into sin, the Bible says, right? He was the first one that was born into sin. That's what I'm trying to say.
Oh, okay.
That's my theology.
No, I get that.
Okay, I do
Because
get.
Adam and Eve weren't born into sin.
Okay,
No.
I do get that, though. But to say that he is the offspring of the serpent, then every single person born into sin would have to be an offspring of the serpent, which would
That's
go ahead.
That's the curse. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, if that's the case, then that means Satan is fighting against himself.
How does that mean Satan's fighting against himself?
He's fighting
It's
against
his
own
off-
children.
it's his own children.
He's
It's his
fighting
offspring.
His own children.
No, because Eve's live, which is the Messiah eventually, right?
Mm-hmm.
Is fighting against the seed of the seed of the serpent. That's why we have internal struggles. That's why there's spiritual warfare.
Okay.
Because both of them exist in us because we're not made perfect until we go to heaven.
Okay, so that's a great point. So once then somebody gets that sin out, which is through a savior, which is the way God planned it. You can't get it out by being a good person. So once someone is born again, or in the Old Testament, once someone believes in the sacrifice and trusts in God, as Abraham did, it's accounted to him as unto righteousness. So therefore now he is made a child of God. He is adopted into the family of God. And now those people are now fighting against the offspring of Satan.
Yes, but they're also it's still in them too. So like even Abraham, his righteousness was counted to him because of his faith, right?
Yes.
But he still sinned. Like he still had issues with lying about his wife to Pharaoh and that other guy, I always forget his name. Where they took her in to be his wife, and then God punished them. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah. What?
So like there's none perfect, not even him. So even though he accepts and trusts God, he is still fighting. Well, not him, but the Holy Spirit was fighting for him, through him, against his own sin nature.
Okay. All right. So now we got, at least we've cleared up. I still don't think it's good language to call human beings the offspring of the serpent, because we're talking about seed, and it takes us back to Marshall's thought, and that is, how then do you theologically understand what's metaphorical, what's literal? And so I want to take us back to the garden scene, and I want to take us back to Genesis chapter 3, and I want to just walk through that real quick, because if you walk through there and you begin to go, okay, this is literal, this is metaphorical, how do you do that? How do you depict? So the first thing we're going to look at is that Satan, or the serpent, I shouldn't say Satan right away, the serpent, who is known there, the Nakash, comes to Eve and begins talking to Eve. Now, we know that animals don't talk, but some people say, well, maybe they did before the fall. Okay, that's a good idea, but theologically we don't know that. That's not true. We don't know if that's true or not. And yes, Balaam's donkey talked to him. We still don't know if that's true that animals could talk. So maybe we're dealing with a real serpent. Maybe we're dealing with a spiritual entity, but we'll digress. We'll just say it was a serpent. So this serpent, the Nakash, begins talking to Eve and begins to ask her, God did not say you could eat from any tree of the garden. Now, all of a sudden, we know that he is speaking to her about trees of the garden. Not just one tree, but all the trees. So all of a sudden now, this serpent is, this conversation, the serpent identifies that there are trees that she could eat from, but one particular tree that she couldn't eat from. And he's saying, God's not really, he's not going to have a problem with that. So my first thing is this then. Are they literal trees, or are they metaphorical for something? And the reason I say that is because Marshall shared last week that some people, himself included, might think that this whole idea of the fruit was a like sexual seed type fruit.
Yeah, it was. It's not a. How's the word? It's not a apple on the tree. It's a pear on the ground.
A pear on the ground. That's a good way. All right. That's good. A pear on the ground. Yeah, you got that. All right.
Yeah.
All right.
No.
That's good. That's
catchy.
Good. Yeah.
Catchy.
I still think it was pomegranate, but
And they would raise a little cane.
they would. Right,
And, real quick, I just want to interject real fast. And
Yeah.
another thing that kind of muddies this up is, okay, so in the word eat, okay, which is a call in Hebrew. Okay, so it depends on whose lexicon you're reading from. You know what I mean? Some people it doesn't say anything about lay with. You know what I mean? Under the connotation, a call can mean lay with, and you know what I mean? To where this connotation, it says to eat of. But when you start, I mean, I'm just saying, it's right here. But when it's considered meat, right? If you're calling meat, like another connotation is lay, L-A-Y.
Okay. So, all right. So let's just talk about that for a minute. So anytime even a lexicon begins to say, okay, there could be another meaning for a word, you still have to look at the context of what's going on.
Yeah, and
That's
trace
really
and trace it back through, like, and to see how it's been used in through the other. You know what I mean? Like the way you can click the. I'm sorry to interrupt.
No. I would agree, but even if I traced it back through, if I say, for instance, and this might seem a little vulgar, but say, for instance, 50 years ago, I would say, man, that ass over there is a real problem. Automatically, you might think that I was talking about an animal, a donkey. In this culture, you might think I was talking about a female, a certain, or a male, I guess, if I was female talking about this. You might think I was talking about the backside of a person, but the context is always going to dictate. Doesn't matter how it was used in the past a million times. The context of the writing will always tell you how it's being used. So you have to get the context and know, oh, there's a donkey over there. That's what he's talking about.
Yeah.
So the context will always tend to lead you to the right interpretation, whether it's going to be literal or figurative. And what I'm trying to say here in Genesis chapter 3 is that so far it appears that everything they're talking about is literal, to the degree that even when it comes to this whole offspring thing, we start to go, well, that's more metaphorical, which we'll get back to that, because I think you can still see that that's literal, and I'll just talk about that in a minute. So when you're talking about eat, you go back to the lexicons, there may be a word if you go back, and that word used there for eat may very well mean lay, but when you look at the context here, it doesn't make sense. Here's the first reason why it doesn't make sense. I'll just tell you real quick. If that's the case, Adam watched Eve have sex with a serpent, and then Eve turned and looked at Adam and say, why don't you let him violate you? And then he violated him.
I could totally see that happening.
Well, I know you could. That's why I figured I'd bring it up. But the problem is that if that happened, then what's the reasoning behind that? Why? Why is that happening? Because he wouldn't have to have sex with Adam, because Adam can't have offspring. So why would that all have to happen?
Just because, why does it happen to this day?
But wasn't the serpent, if the serpent was trying to have sex with Eve, wasn't this strategic? Wasn't there a strategy going on here? And so why would Adam even have to do this? See, Adam was disobeying what God already told them. Do not eat of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. He didn't say don't eat of the serpent's loins.
Yeah.
He said don't eat of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. So both Adam and Eve now are in a predicament where they are being challenged and questioned whether they should eat this fruit, which will open up their eyes. And again, we can say the opening of eyes is some kind of a metaphorical thing, and to a degree it is. But the question would be then, does that mean the serpent, when she gave the fruit to Adam, which would be the serpent, here, I just laid with this serpent. Here, you lay with this serpent, Adam. And Adam took and laid with the serpent. That doesn't make sense contextually.
Well, if the serpent had, if it was more than a man, right? And now, obviously, this is what ifs and all that.
Right.
Okay, but we know that the Gotamendis and the Baphomet has both male and female parts. Just from pictures of it, it has breasts and it has, a penis.
Right.
Okay. So I don't know. I'm just throwing it out there.
So even with that, though, there's nothing in the context that tells us that.
I agree. But going back real quick to the word akah. So what it looks like to me, yes, if it was a fruit, okay, and if they're pulling it from a tree, then in that context, akah means the fruit. But if it was a sexual thing, you know what I mean? And if it was a desire of the flesh, it would mean to eat of, to lay with. You know what I'm saying? Like right in itself, it's almost like a trap. Is how do you want to perceive what is being spoken to you? You know what I mean? Like, because it's set up both ways.
Right. And that's why I think, like the question you ask, how are you supposed to know? I think you got to let the standard of context lead you. And the context here, I don't think in any way can lead you to the fact that it was sexual fruit or laying with somebody. The idea of eating would be laying something. I don't think contextually you can do that with the text unless you really start to twist stuff. Anybody else have any thoughts on that so far?
Is a lexicon a mix between a leprechaun and a Mexican?
Yes, but the colors are green and brown that they mix. It's not all green, not all brown.
this is the struggle that I have with this whole discussion. Is it's like we're in a bathtub covered with head and shoulders. You're gonna fall down. You can never stand up. We're on all these slippery slopes where if we don't peg something down, you can't get going. And so,
well, that's why I think what the question that he asked, that Marshall asked, and then what Ralph was talking about is that if you're going to have good sound theology, you really have to think through these. And most people don't think through these things.
Well, they have to be rational. They have to be rational, commonsensical, and certainly I get your argument. Like, listen, there's a video of the black rapper fella.
Tupac.
No, he's very popular right now.
Big Daddy Strong.
No, he's still alive.
Big Daddy Weave.
No, it's definitely not Big Daddy Weave. Anyway, he has a video where he is Satan in the garden and he is picking himself up. He announced that he's a homosexual. And it's the scene in the garden.
Kanye West.
No.
I know what you're talking about. He just came out with a shoe.
Yes.
I don't know his name.
I don't either.
The 666 shoe.
Yes, it's really annoying.
Michael Jordan.
No. Wrong, and wrong.
Okay.
Here's the thing, though. He comes out as gay Satan and gay himself and proposes that, he made out with a gay Adam. And so what you're saying is it's not crazy. We're living it out on the television.
Well, okay, let me make this point real quick.
But we can't,
it's not crazy to the mind that does not think through the scriptures
right.
and look at the context. It's not crazy. Because a world could believe in all that stuff. Like, I could believe in that.
Yeah.
But when I look at the scriptures and I look at the context, I'm going, makes no sense, not to mention it's poor theology.
Well, if it was eating of an apple, literal, like I take this apple off a tree, eat it, then why was the curse involved with labor pain, and involved with labor?
Maybe it was poisonous fruit.
Why didn't her teeth just fall? Why wasn't the curse involving eating something and having no teeth then? Why was the curse involving reproduction?
Okay, so this is my thought. What were they told? What were Adam and Eve told was their purpose for living? Their purpose in living. What was part of their purpose? To care for the garden, and what else?
Oh, shoot.
Make children.
To be fruitful and
multiply.
Fruitful and multiply.
So when they decided to disobey God, this is just my thought. And I'm not trying to allegorize anything. I'm not trying to literalize anything. This is my thought. They were told, this is your purpose. I want you to propagate the earth. I want you to multiply and be fruitful. And I want all these children to depend on me and trust in me. And so when they decided to disobey God, that curse now transferred, that sin, that disobedience transferred to the children. So part of that sin curse then...
Through what means, though? How did the sin transfer from where it was originally to Adam and Eve?
Well, it is a spiritual manifestation now that begins to start to move.
Listen, we can get as crazy as you want with it. It could be a click in our DNA, it's the thing that makes us die.
But let me
our degeneration of our DNA.
But let me say this.
Yeah, go ahead.
The word sin oftentimes talks about separation. So the word sin is to miss the mark. Greek is harmatia, means to miss the mark. So the idea of sin is that it separates us from the holy God. So if I'm sinning, if I was close to God, then that means my reproductive system works the way it was supposed to. But now all of a sudden, when I'm separated from God, a curse comes, and that curse means my reproductive system doesn't work, my antioxidant system or my immune system doesn't work the way it works, so I could have been immune to all kinds of things, but I'm not anymore. That means that now all of a sudden thorns and thistles are growing out of the ground, and now I'm going to have to work by the sweat of my brow. So those are all...
Well, it affected all living things on Earth.
Yes.
Right?
So in my view is that this spiritual curse came through and had physical manifestations. And the reason for that is because when God created them, he created them good, meaning they were supposed to work the way they were supposed to. They were supposed to procreate and do what God told them to do. They disobeyed God, and therefore at that point in time, this spiritual curse of separation from God entered. And that separation now, this is what we get. We get bodies that don't work the way they're supposed to. We get attitudes that aren't the way they're supposed to be. And that's that whole separation thing. And we know that separation because God came down walking in the cool of the day in chapter 3. And Adam, where are you? And they're hiding. Why? Because they're separated now. They're ashamed. So that's my theory on that. Why it affected the reproductive thing is because they don't work. We don't work the way we were supposed to. We were created good. And because we disobeyed God, we separated ourselves from the only goodness, and now we don't work right. And the only way for you and I to work right is to get back in relationship with God through the person of Jesus Christ.
I agree with all that.
Okay.
Real quick, kind of a side note. This is kind of wild. So if this is all light and sound real quick, the equation to a sine wave literally says "cause I sin" right in it. COSI.
I got yeah. Okay, I hear you.
So it's just, I just want to throw that, it's like when it says you're all born into sin. Well, we're literally all born into sine wave, SIN waves. And it's funny that you said like the harmonica was the
Harmatia?
Harmatia. Well, look, the word harmony comes right out of that, does it not?
Yeah.
So when you do have harmony, you have resonance and vibration and frequency and all that.
And I don't even have a problem looking at that kind of stuff because in the spiritual realm...
the point I was going to make was if you want to, like last year, felt like a year ago. Last week we were talking about the staircase, which would be, he described the throne of God, and you're like, well, that's a picture of DNA. Like, that's cool. That's awesome. I think that's definitely something that we could, build from and get behind. And as far as like the fruit thing, who knows? Like, God made the tree, and God didn't want them to eat from it, and maybe that's the thing that altered their genetics immediately, and that's why it was painful, and that was why it was, it was what, like, these things are not hard to, I don't know, they're not hard to get around and let them be what they are.
Yeah, because if you're gonna go the route of the reason her reproductive system was messed up because she had sex with Eve, then you go, well, how come Adam he had to live by the sweat of his brow? Because if he had sex with the serpent as well, then why didn't something sexually happen with him?
Yeah.
Because all he has to do now is work his tail off to make things work.
Well, that's because she initiated it. She got the brunt of it, you know what I mean? And all women do. Look at households.
I get it.
I know how my household's conducted. Hats off to my wife. She does more than it's crazy.
I get that, but you know what? Here's the neat thing, Marshall. If you start looking at the New Testament and you look at Jesus's wording and Paul in Ephesians, you are to love your wife as Christ loved the church and gave himself up for her. That means husbands, they don't really, according to the way we've done things in the past, we don't really know what it means to love our wives. So we look at our wives and we go, hats off to them. They do a lot of stuff. But we actually, as husbands in Christ Jesus, should be learning a new way to serve and to love our wives and our kids. And I think that looks different than what it looked like in the past, because theologically, I think people use sometimes scripture text just for power trips.
Well, I mean, I'm pretty sure, childbirth has always looked the way it has, and
I agree.
It would definitely kill us, most likely.
I agree.
All right, I'm gonna interject here real quick.
Jump on in there, Ralph.
All right, because I have to at least get off the video. I can still talk on the phone, but I got to get ready for work. So I'd like to say something to you and our listeners. There's a book called The King and His Beauty, A Biblical Theology of the Old and New Testaments by Thomas R. Schreiner. And so if you end up getting into that, anybody like you guys there or people that are watching, you can read the whole thing, but as far as I'm talking about the serpent being like a theme, if you read just the first chapter on Genesis, you'll get what I'm trying to say about the serpent offspring. Because I'm sure they explain it a lot better than I do.
And Ralph, even though I'm making my faces and stuff, number one, I love you, but number two, I'm not necessarily. I kind of understand where you're coming from. I just think maybe we should use different language. That's all.
All right. Well, either way, you should take a look at just the first chapter.
Okay. Could you put a link in the comments there, or even just put the name of the book whenever you get a chance?
Yes.
All right. Thanks.
But other than that, I was going to say one thing, one quote from the book that talks about Cain demonstrated that he belonged to the children of the serpent by slaying Abel and the offspring of the woman. And they use 3 Bible verses, but the one is from John 8:44 for a reference. It says, "You are of your father the devil, and you want to do the desires of your father. He was a murderer from the beginning and does not stand in the truth because there was no truth in him. Whenever he speaks is a lie, he speaks from his own nature, and he is a liar and the father of lies. So that's Jesus referencing Cain, and I think
Is he? Are you sure? Okay, go ahead.
well, you can double look at it.
Well, not
later.
only is he
But
referencing,
he's talking about how I lost my train of thought, man. I'm sorry.
I'm
But,
sorry.
When we're in sin, we're not submitting to the Father in heaven. We're submitting to the Father who is Satan, which is the serpent. That was my point for that.
yeah, no, that's a great, and because that would directly relate Cain to being a manifestation of Satan in a way, because it's saying like Satan was the first murderer, the father, or basically in paraphrasing exactly what you were saying. But it's also important, that whole section, John, like the book of John, chapter 8, like where Brian had read from it last week, but we didn't get all the way to John 8:44. Because he is, and don't forget too who Jesus is talking to in that section. He's talking to the Pharisees of the day, saying how your father is the devil. Your father is not my father. We have two different fathers here. That whole section is, yeah. I mean, then that totally, I agree with all that stuff. I mean, that actually enforces through Old and New Testament, so this ideology in a way, I guess, if you perceive it, how you perceive it, though.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Where's the? I'm trying to find the verse here. Where's the verse that says you of your father?
8:44.
8:44. Okay, you are of your father, the devil, and you want to do his desires of your father. He was a murderer from the beginning. Now, where does that say that's Cain? Here's where theology breaks down. People start to go, oh, that's talking about Cain because it's talking about a murderer.
It's talking about the devil.
It's talking about Diablos,
El Diablo.
the slanderer. It's not talking about Cain.
I could be completely wrong on that. I'm sorry.
No, you don't have to be sorry. I'm just saying this is exact. I agree 100% with you, Ralph, and I'm the same way. I will take scripture texts and I will read them and I will begin to talk about them and I will think through something and I'll start to do something and then I'll go back and I'll go, I can't say that because it doesn't say that.
I mean, read that one more time.
Okay, so he says, you are of your father, the devil, and you want to do the desires of your father. He was a murderer from the beginning and does not stand in the truth because there is no truth in him.
Well, where does it say in the Bible where did Lucifer or the devil murder somebody?
Okay, time out. It doesn't, but to imply that he's speaking about Cain when in the context he's speaking clearly about the slanderer.
And where must murder come from? Sin and El Diablo.
But I mean, who was the first murder? Oh, I'm saying, I see where both of you guys are saying, but I look at it like, well, who was the first murderer?
But again, remember?
But if you go by just the words there, it says your father, the devil, he was a murderer. Mm-hmm. It doesn't say your father, the devil, and the other guy who was a murderer.
Well, there was only one murderer, though, is what I'm saying.
That we know of.
No, after Cain, there was tons of murderers.
I'm from the beginning, though. I mean,
That's a giant leap to go. All right, it's obviously the original murderer.
Okay,
I don't see it that big of a leap, though.
Okay, so listen. Not that the serpent did this. Eve and Adam did it to themselves. But what does Paul say that sin brings forth? And what did God say if you ate of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil? What does it bring forth? It brings forth death. Mm-hmm. So technically, death came through their disobedience.
Murder is death.
If you trace that all the way back, death came before Cain ever murdered his brother.
Death came before he murdered his brother. Well, yeah, because death would be at the fall.
Does that make God the murderer?
No, it would make
Adam and Eve.
Adam and Eve, or the serpent.
I was joking. I'm sorry.
No, we're very literal over here right now, Ralph. Do not mess around.
Yeah. So I guess that's where context. I have preached this for 17, probably 20 years, but at least 17 years. Context. And you have to make sure that when you're reading a scripture text, It's the context, the immediate context, but then the context of the whole Bible. So I am with you. Go back. Where was the first murderer? I agree. Cain was the first technically physical murderer. However, that context does not say
If it were
anything about
that,
that.
if that were that important, you would think he would write, like the first murderer.
Yeah.
Well, also too, to bring it back full circle in the beginning of it, let's not forget who he's talking to and calling, you are of your father the devil, and he's talking to the Jews. So,
Well, the Jews that were there.
the Jews that were there, the Pharisaic Jews,
Right.
that were trying to kill him.
Right. So so keep in
So,
context, right?
Yeah,
Right.
I agree.
Okay. So, but look at what he also says in John 8. He says, verse 37. I know that you are Abraham's descendants,
Yeah,
and yet you seek to kill me.
yeah, through Esau though.
So, okay. Oh, okay.
You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah, and you could draw that conclusion, but are not Jacob's descendants also plagued with this sin problem?
oh yeah, we've been led down it. We're going into the 7th time now.
And are not Jacob's descendants also people who will allow themselves to have their father as the devil?
Yeah, they'll fall prey to it, worship false
Okay.
idols and all that. You know.
So that's why I love this discussion time, because this is what really charges me, because I love to learn and to get into the scriptures and go, wait a minute, I missed that. I didn't see the context of that, and I am a context freak. And so if you're going to interpret the scriptures well, you have to take the context. And then once you take the context, you have to think. And I love that about all of us. Marshall, I love that about you, Ralph, all of us. We think through these things. And I think that's part of what I hope, although some people may find these talks here on Fridays kind of boring right now, but I think they're really good, because I think we're coming to conclusions that most people don't even think about.
Yeah, and it's great because.
So-
Sorry, Ralph. Go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say it's great that there's, especially today, there's 3 different sets of interpretations of the same scripture all coming together and trying to understand it. You know what I mean? And the fact that we can do it all as Christians too. It's not like you have to bring in a Satanist and an atheist and a Jewish and all these different kind of ideologies and theologies together to have some sort of debate.
Right.
We can debate the scripture all being Christians, but all having a different interpretation of it.
Right, I would agree. However, I would also say that and I don't know necessarily whose is right necessarily. I may think my interpretation is correct. You may think yours is. But I think we all should understand that there is only one interpretation. Because if there isn't, then it's going to change the whole of theology. Ralph, would you agree or disagree with that?
Yes, there is only one interpretation. It's God's one. It's the correct one. It's
Right,
just
I agree.
we as individuals try to define that out, and we all have differences on what that is.
Right,
I agree with that.
okay.
But I will say 2 things real quick.
Yeah.
Because I really have to get going. One, I agree with your statement that this is boring to most people, because when I went to go post that comment, I was the only one watching on YouTube.
This is great.
And 2, I posted that book on YouTube on the chat section.
Okay.
So
All right,
it's
great.
available for everybody if you want to look into it. I would at least read the first chapter if you can.
Okay.
I will definitely do that.
All right. So what's really neat here too is that just one quick thing about Cain, and then maybe next week we come back, we can talk about the idea of Adam knowing his wife, because that's going to really play into the context of whether or not Satan actually had sex with Eve and Cain was the offspring. Because when you go into chapter 4, and we talked about that, Marshall, last week, and you said, hey, I want some evidence, and so I have some stuff here. Also, I posted on, I think, Facebook, maybe not on YouTube, but if you're on there, if you go and subscribe to our uneducated, dedicated channel, and you just email us that you subscribed today or this weekend, then I'll get you this information. I'll just send it to you via the email concerning all these scripture texts that we're using for today's show and stuff. But the last point I want to make is something that we talked about too concerning the whole Eve thing. And some people argue that when God came and asked Eve, what did you do? And she said, the serpent deceived me, or the serpent beguiled me. The word beguiled there can mean, again, we look at this whole lexicon, leprechauns and Mexicans put together. That was math. That was a good one. It can mean to seduce or to sexually seduce. However, if you look at the context here, the word can also mean, the same word can mean to lend on interest or be a creditor. So the idea here is that we are sold into sin, and this idea of the word redemption and the concept of redemption, God buying us back, would also play into the whole theology of the Old Testament and the New Testament, that this whole thing was almost like we became now enslaved because of our disobedience. We didn't have sexual sin. We disobeyed God, and when we disobeyed God, we became a slave to sin now, which is what Paul talks about all the time, that we're slaves to sin.
Or sine wave, because we're trapped in the flesh.
Hey, I'm fine with that too.
Because one thing can mean 5 different things too. You know, that's the beauty of this, is like it's multifaceted.
No, now, okay, so I know, Marshall, here's the thing that I struggle with, and I know you say the beauty of it, but I don't see it as beauty. I see it as either deception or truth. So we have to come back, and if context is king, then there's no way I can come to the beauty of Satan having sex with Eve if context is king. Now, if context isn't king, I can decide whatever I want. Matter of fact, there's a scripture text in Ephesians that says, hey, let no man steal, or let no more steal, but rather work with his hands. Now, if I take that out of context, or if I move a comma, let no man work, rather let him steal. And all of a sudden, it's what I want it to be. I think I'm allowed to go around and steal things and not work anymore because that's how I've interpreted it. And I think we have to be so stinking careful about the context, because we have to know what's being talked about in the context.
I mean, I totally agree with you, but, you know, the way that it was presented, all these words that could mean this or could mean that, depending on the context, the word itself sways the context in a way. You know what I mean? Like, depending on how you're going to interpret the word, it will change the paragraph.
To a point, but... All right, let's say that you did take that verse that way to mean that you could go steal. Well, obviously it's contradictory with the Ten Commandments.
Well, yeah, I mean, I'm not saying that. I'm saying as far as
you're
like
using
going.
When we say context, you're using immediate, but you're looking at it over the whole breadth of the Bible. If it doesn't match something else in the Bible, or it definitely is contradictory to something else going on in the Bible, you got to throw it out. So you have to use the whole book. That's why it's important to learn the whole book.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's why, you know, like the points I'm bringing up, they're supported in John. They're supported in theologians.
Okay, so are they supported in John though? After what we just read, do you still think they're supported in John?
Well, yeah, because you and me both have a different perception of how it's interpreted, I guess. But you know what I mean? Because it's worded one way, and yeah, you look at it from this way, but I mean, there's no denying Cain was the first murderer, and it says nowhere in the Bible that Satan says the first murder. You know, like where does it? It doesn't bring any kind of reference to Lucifer murdering anybody.
But John 8 does not say first murder. It just says he was a murder. He, speaking of Diablos,
was a murderer from the beginning.
Was a murderer. He's specifically saying that the devil, the slanderer, which is the Greek word there, the devil was a murderer from the beginning. Jesus is saying that.
Yes.
So you either Jesus is a liar, or he's dumb, because he's saying wait, I really meant Cain was the murderer, but I said Diablos.
But what I'm saying though is it's where I'm coming from is it's one and the same. You know, it's a there's layers of it. You know what I mean?
Isn't that only if you believe though that Cain is the son, actual offspring, the seed?
Yeah, you would have to. Yeah, exactly. So that's where we have like the contrast of I see it that way, you see it that way, because I'm coming from the perception of like it's a genetic, it's a seed issue. When it says seed, I take it literally,
right?
You know,
but doesn't that interpretation now open you up to say, if a guy walks in here and he's the seed of Satan, that gives me a right to say he deserves to die because he can never be forgiven, he can never be a part of God's family because he's Satan himself. He's the seed of Satan.
I never would say he deserves to die, but him being a seed of Satan, he's going to have to come to terms with that, and he's going to have to basically accept Jesus as his Lord and Savior. And even the word, well, let's just say Yeshua as his Lord and Savior, you know what I mean? Because there's no same with all of us, I guess. I mean, without Jesus, you would have to be redeemed. But when this stuff was, Jesus came down and there was a new covenant made with man, correct?
He did create a new covenant at the table at the Last Supper. He created a new covenant. Yeah.
So if the children of Satan were damned to hell before Jesus, potentially, okay, let's say if it was a seed thing, it was a genetic thing, the people, like the offspring of Satan, would be damned to hell if it was a genetic thing, because only the children of the Father would be able to get to heaven, right? So if Jesus came down and interjected, and he did come down to save the Jews. That's what he's here to do. He was here because he had to open up a passage for them to be able to get to heaven now.
Mm-hmm.
You know, plus
Right.
anyone else that has a genetic,
Which would be all of us, right?
yeah, at this point with all the
Well, it was all of us before that, because
genetic
you
and
made the point about,
purification.
you made the point about Ruth and
Rahab.
Rahab. Like, he wasn't just saving his people. Like, there was, I think that in the Old Testament, if God, would talk to you and you would talk to God, you had a potential to be saved. Now, I do think that it was much more difficult to have that available, but not wandering here, there, or anywhere.
Yeah.
I think the point that you were trying to make was if somebody came in the door that identify, I don't even know how you'd want to say it, but let's say we knew that they're irredeemable because
Their father's the
they're
devil.
incarnate of Satan. Then God says he hates sin, and I gotta imagine he hates the devil.
Mm-hmm.
Would we have authority, like what you're saying? Would we then have authority to kill him?
No, not at all, because who are you to kill anybody? He
What
would
about
have to
a-
find Jesus Christ, because that's why Jesus Christ came down here. He came down here as the Redeemer. So anyone that wanted
Right.
redeemed, that's the way to heaven, is through Christ.
Okay. All right. So we agree on that. So this is what I think opens it up for cultic type of groups, governments. If they believe that, they think then they have the power. And that's why certain groups or cults, or that's why certain governments have said, hey, we can put all these people into concentration camps. We can gas all these people.
Yes.
We can treat people like this. We can hate
That's where
people.
you get your superiority.
And that's why today Christians are being told that they're racist because they're Christians.
Yeah.
Well, how does that make me a racist? I say, like what you said, all people can have faith in Jesus Christ. All people can have life. But yet because I say it's only through Jesus, I'm now a racist, or I'm an exclusionist, or whatever you want to call it.
Exactly, and that's brought about by forces that's the synagogue of Satan
Right.
that the Bible references. That is coming after us all.
Right.
And who is the synagogue of Satan? Well, I'm sitting here telling you that it just so happens that if they're not Jewish people, they're pretty much working for Jewish people. You know what I mean? Unfortunately, and it says it right in the Bible. This confirms it in Revelation 2:9 and 3:9. It says they say they are Jews,
But are not.
and are not.
They are the synagogue of Satan.
Synagogue of Satan.
Right. And so that's a particular sect of people, but it's not all Jewish people.
Not all
right?
Jews, but they're saying they are.
Uh-huh.
So, and when you look at who's the head of Pfizer, who's the head of Moderna, who's the Sackler family that poisons our streets with OxyContin, like all this. That's where I'm compiling. Maybe I'll have it ready next week. If not
Okay.
next week, the week after.
All right.
I have a list of crimes. We're talking hundreds of crimes. And then the people, like we'll just call them, for lack of a better term, the synagogue of Satan, they've been kicked out from 109 different regions and territories.
Well, that's why
1,366
That's why they
times.
had nowhere to go.
Yeah,
up
but-
until 46.
Yeah, when they're vagabonds of the earth, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, again, you're making a reference back to Cain. So did you catch that?
No.
They're vagabonds of the earth. He's referencing Cain because Cain was going to be a vagabond.
That's what they said.
And he had a mark put on him.
Yeah.
What's the mark?
It's on his forehead. Right?
Okay,
But
all
what's funny, you may think this is, whatever, but what's the mark of a cane? It's the hook, right? The mark of a good shepherd's cane would be the hook. Right?
Okay. All right.
Well, there you go. There's the mark of Cain.
Okay.
It's right on the forehead,
Okay. All right.
protruding downward.
Well, that's better than what I thought. I thought
Oh, good grief!
I thought you might.
Oh my goodness gracious!
Now see how that kind of
Now
reads
we're
in?
making nose.
I know it's
now we're
horrible.
making nose jokes.
I know it's horrible.
Did we lose Ralph already?
Ralph.
I'm still here.
Well, hey, I think we're gonna table everything for next week. We're gonna talk about how Adam knew his wife and whether or not the idea of knowing someone in the scriptures means to have sex with them. We're also gonna talk about Edom and the Edomites next week. This is really gonna get a lot of people to come back. I know that. And this is and we're also gonna try to talk about black people in the Bible and whether or not black people, because of their skin color or because of maybe where they descended from, if that makes them some kind of a lesser race or a people that we need to be maybe fighting against. Because I really believe this in the world today, that the powers that be are led by demonic entities who want human beings, all human beings, black, white, red, yellow, brown, whatever it is, they want us to fight against each other and hate one another, because that's exactly the opposite of what Jesus taught us. He taught us to love each other. He taught us to bless those who curse us, and I think that's exactly what these entities want us to do.
And there's way more of us than they want. They need us to dwindle ourselves down. That way, we're easier to enslave for the 7-year period or however.
Oh, they
long.
got that figured out with the vaccine.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, without a doubt.
Yeah.
And trust me, I think we're already enslaved. We just don't know it yet.
Well, that's how I don't understand how people cannot look at, like, when they're saying you need proof of vaccination to come into this place or that place, and like in France now they're saying you need proof of vaccination to shop at the grocery store. How can I? That's why I'm not losing faith in humanity, but it's just like, wow, what a not even humbling. It's just realizing the role for what it is and how lost it is, like people aren't relating this to, I mean, this is right out of the Bible, you know, and people just aren't getting it yet. Maybe they will once,
No,
once
I don't think I don't think they will, because I don't think they get it until they're beating on the walls of the outside of the ark while drowning.
I agree with you. And, now would be anytime now, it's prime time for something else to come in to cause more confusion to people,
Right. No, I agree. Revelation tells us that even though the judgments will be being poured out and people are called by an angel of heaven who's going to go out throughout the earth and tell people to repent, people are going to shake their fist at God and say, why are you doing this to us? Instead of repenting.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So we're in trouble.
Which sounds exactly like what man would do.
Yeah, definitely. All right, well, we're going to get out of here today. We hope that you guys have a great weekend, and tell your friends that this is really important stuff, and they need to listen to this, because it's important that people think through the Word of God, because that's where the truth lies, and you're not going to find it out on CNN or MSNBC or even Alex Jones. You're just not going to find it anywhere.
Alex Jones.
Alex Jones. Or Owen Schroyer, who's supposed to be in prison right now, but he's not. They played that whole thing up.
No, he got himself out on bail.
Yeah. Oh, so
You can do that.
Okay. Well,
That's
they played
not
it up.
odd.
But they played it up like he was going to prison that day.
Well, I don't understand he could be, if he couldn't get himself out, he could be.
I know, but they knew.
But why are they coming after him now?
I know.
I don't know. If this turns out to be some kind of shtick,
Yeah.
that'll make Alex Jones 6% wrong.
Well, that's true. Because he does have a lot of good information.
He sure does.
Yeah. All right. So have a great week. And Marshall, were you getting ready to share something
Nope.
else or no?
Nope.
All right. Have a great week. We'll see you here next Friday at 10:03 maybe.
See you guys.
All right.
Bye, guys.
Go ahead. You finish out your thought.
Well, we got an error report.